Imagine waking up to a news cycle where the foundational pillars of global stability seem to be collapsing in real time. You look at the headlines, and the reality is jarring. The President of the United States is publicly dressing down America's oldest and closest allies. American service members are locked in a deadly, escalating hot war with Iran, and Israel has just executed a decapitation strike against Tehran's highest-level security apparatus, sending shockwaves across the Persian Gulf. These are not the plot points of a dystopian political thriller. This is the stark, volatile reality of our world right now in March 2026. The geopolitical chessboard is not just being rearranged, the board itself is being fractured. Today, we are going to break down this unprecedented convergence of crises, separating the noise from the deeply consequential facts, and analyze how these interconnected dominoes are shaking the global order to its absolute core. Buckle up, because the implications of what is happening right now will define the next decade. Let us begin with the seismic rift tearing through the transatlantic alliance. President Donald Trump, having returned to the Oval Office in January 2025, has just dropped a rhetorical bombshell that is threatening to unravel decades of diplomatic and military cooperation. In a recent and highly controversial statement, President Trump slammed NATO allies, explicitly accusing European partners of hiding from the front lines during the two-decade-long war in Afghanistan. He claimed that Allied forces stayed a little off the front lines, a remark that has instantly ignited a firestorm of fury from veterans, active-duty military personnel, and political leaders across the globe. One former United States Army general publicly condemned the remarks as repulsive and a fundamental betrayal of the shared sacrifices made in the unforgiving terrain of Helmand and Kandahar. To understand why this is sparking such intense outrage, we have to look at the historical facts of the Afghanistan conflict. When the United States was attacked on September 11, 2001, NATO invoked Article 5, the principle of collective defense, for the first and only time in its history. European and allied nations did not just offer moral support, they sent their sons and daughters to fight alongside Americans. The prompt dismisses the heavy toll borne by these nations. The United Kingdom lost hundreds of service members, and nations like Poland, Canada, France, and Germany suffered significant casualties and thousands of life-altering injuries. Polish General Roman Polko, a veteran of both the Afghanistan and Iraq campaigns, stated unequivocally that Trump has crossed a red line because those allies paid with blood. Retired UK Army Chief General Richard Dennett went even further, labeling the comments totally disrespectful, wrong, and outrageous, and openly questioning the strategic wisdom emanating from the current White House. Yet there is a hard-nosed political calculus behind this rhetoric. The administration is using this aggressive posture as a blunt instrument to force a radical restructuring of NATO burden sharing. President Trump has reportedly secured a staggering pledge for allies to move towards spending 5% of their GDP on defense, a massive leap from the previously struggled over 2% benchmark. The White House has doubled down on the president's remarks, arguing that the core truth remains: the American taxpayer has disproportionately subsidized European security for generations. However, critics and seasoned diplomats are flashing warning signs. Driving a wedge into NATO through historical revisionism leaves allies dumbfounded and disgusted at the exact moment when a unified front is desperately needed. With Europe urgently ramping up its own defense industrial base to counter persistent threats from a mobilized Russia, fracturing the alliance of Western democracies invites adversarial powers to test NATO's resolve. This brings us to the second, incredibly dangerous flashpoint: the Middle East. The United States is no longer engaging in a shadow war or a proxy conflict. America is deep into a hot, kinetic war with Iran that escalated sharply in late February 2026. The updates coming out of the Pentagon paint a grim and sobering picture of the human cost. As of this moment, at least 13 American service members have been killed in action, with approximately 140 others wounded. These numbers are not static, they are climbing as the operational tempo increases. The heaviest blow came early in the conflict, when a sophisticated Iranian drone swarm bypassed air defenses and struck a major U.S. military installation in Kuwait, wiping out several Army Reserve troops in a single devastating blow. This was followed rapidly by another American fatality resulting from an Iranian retaliatory strike aimed at Saudi Arabia. The casualty reports provide a window into the ferocity of this localized war. While the White House estimates up to 150 wounded, with 108 fortunate enough to have sustained minor injuries and returned to duty, there are 8 severe, life-threatening cases currently being treated at military medical facilities. This conflict, now grinding into its third brutal week, was ignited by joint U.S. and Israeli preemptive strikes on Iranian military infrastructure on February 28, 2026. What began as a targeted degradation of capabilities has violently pulled in neighboring Gulf states and triggered a massive spike in global energy markets. American troops stationed across the region are currently operating under constant threat, facing daily barrages of suicide drones, precision-guided ballistic missiles, and relentless harassment from Iran-aligned militia swarms spanning from Iraq to Syria. Tehran, feeling backed into a corner, has openly vowed further escalation. Back home in the United States, the reality of war is shattering communities. These are not abstract geopolitical figures. These are young reservists from towns in Kansas, Texas, and across the heartland who were deployed suddenly and are now returning to Dover Air Force Base in flak-draped transfer cases. The mounting human toll underscores a massive political paradox for the administration. The president campaigned heavily on a platform of ending endless wars and disentangling America from Middle Eastern conflicts, yet the country now finds itself absorbing casualty rates that rival the early surge periods of the Iraq War. On Capitol Hill, Congress is bitterly divided as it debates emergency supplemental funding to sustain the military operations. Public fatigue is palpable and growing by the day, with recent polling data indicating that 55% of the American electorate vehemently opposes deeper military involvement in the region. As one anonymous Pentagon source starkly framed the dilemma, "We're holding the line, but at what cost? This war is being paid for in American blood, theoretically to ensure regional stability, but the endgame remains perilously unclear." Simultaneously, the geopolitical landscape was completely upended overnight by Israel. In a breathtaking display of intelligence penetration and operational reach, Israel has fundamentally altered the command structure of its greatest adversary. Defense Minister Israel Katz announced that precision Israeli airstrikes successfully eliminated Ali Larijani, the deeply influential secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, along with the operational commander of the Basij militia. These are unequivocally the highest-profile assassinations since the regional war began. Larijani was not merely a political figurehead, he was a hardened veteran of the Iranian establishment, a hardliner who played a central orchestrating role in coordinating the axis of resistance and directing proxy attacks against Israeli and American interests. His removal is a catastrophic intelligence and leadership failure for Tehran. Defense Minister Katz's public statement was brutally blunt, confirming that Israeli forces had successfully crippled a vital node in Iran's command and control network. However, the laws of physics in Middle Eastern geopolitics dictate that every action has an equal and violent reaction. Iran, lacking the capability to penetrate Israel's layered air defenses effectively, chose an asymmetric response. They unleashed a wave of strikes against vulnerable energy infrastructure in neighboring Gulf states, specifically targeting facilities in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The objective was clear: weaponize the global economy. By disrupting the flow of crude oil through the region, Iran triggered an instantaneous 20% spike in global oil prices. Energy markets are currently in absolute turmoil, with Brent crude smashing through the $120 per barrel threshold. This is not just a problem for Wall Street. This translates directly to the pump, hitting the wallets of everyday citizens worldwide and threatening to reignite crippling global inflation. This high-stakes cat-and-mouse game highlights a stark reality. Israel possesses total supremacy in intelligence and technological execution, but Iran's willingness to lash out blindly risks plunging the entire hemisphere into a wider, uncontrollable war. The Gulf states, many of which host the very U.S. bases currently under fire, are caught in the crossfire. They are publicly furious, demanding immediate diplomatic de-escalation, even as intelligence suggests they are quietly providing logistical aid and airspace clearance for coalition strikes against Iran. Defense Minister Kotz has framed the assassination of Larijani as a necessary act of preemptive justice against Iranian aggression, but seasoned military analysts are flashing warning lights. They see a self-sustaining cycle of violence: strike, counterstrike, repeat, with no off-ramp in sight. When you step back, you see how these distinct stories collide like falling dominoes. President Trump's abrasive public bashing of allies weakens the diplomatic and military cohesion of NATO at the exact moment Iran is actively seeking to exploit any cracks in Western unity. Tehran's leadership is undoubtedly cheering the resurgence of American isolationist rhetoric while simultaneously launching suicide drones at American forward operating bases. Meanwhile, Israel is acting with unprecedented boldness, recognizing a window of opportunity, but doing so without the guarantee of unified, ironclad U.S. backing due to the bitter domestic political fights in Washington. The subsequent retaliatory strikes in the Gulf threaten to destabilize oil-dependent economies from Europe to the industrial hubs of Asia. Geopolitically, we are staring down the barrel of a perfect storm. In Eastern Europe, Russia is carefully eyeing opportunities to advance its positions in Ukraine, acutely aware that NATO's political foundation is currently wobbly and distracted. In the Indo-Pacific, China is watching the Taiwan Strait with intense interest, probing to see if American military resolve and resources are stretched too thin by the Middle East and European infighting. President Trump's America First doctrine, the hardline stance of pay up or receive no protection, is echoing loudly through the halls of Brussels, forcing a total recalculation of European security. But the fierce backlash from military veterans signals that this transactional approach to alliances has deep domestic political risks. The mounting casualty counts in the Middle East brutally personalize these high-stakes games. Every dead soldier has a name, a grieving family, and a story of service. Sacrifices that critics argue are indirectly undermined when the commander-in-chief publicly questions the grit and courage of the very allies fighting alongside them. Economically, the fallout from the Gulf infrastructure hits guarantees immediate inflation spikes. Consumers should brace for gas prices rocketing toward $5 a gallon in the near term, heavily impacting the cost of logistics, groceries, and everyday living. Militarily, the assassination of Ali Larijani undeniably disrupts Iran's immediate operational capabilities, throwing their coordination into chaos and buying the coalition vital time. But the Hydra has many heads. Heavily armed proxy forces like Hezbollah in Lebanon loom large, possessing arsenals capable of overwhelming regional defenses if fully unleashed. The ultimate question hovering over the globe right now is this: can the current U.S. administration successfully rally its alienated allies despite the bitter public feuds, or will the weight of these simultaneous crises fundamentally fracture the Western alliance? In the coming days, the world must watch carefully for Iran's inevitable revenge. With conventional options limited, expect a surge in asymmetric warfare, crippling state-sponsored cyber attacks against Western financial institutions or power grids, and a massive surge in coordinated proxy violence. In Washington, the U.S. Congress faces a defining vote on emergency war funding in mid-April. If the American death toll reaches the grim milestone of 20, expect anti-war protests to erupt across major cities and university campuses. There is a possibility that the White House might attempt a tactical pivot, perhaps hastily convening an emergency NATO summit to smooth over ruffled feathers and project strength, though the administration's political base continues to fiercely support the tough, transactional rhetoric. Looking at the longer-term horizon, the events of March 2026 are permanently redefining the architecture of global alliances. Europe is waking up to a stark reality and drastically boosting domestic defense spending, with Germany making a historic pledge to reach 3% of its GDP. But the fundamental trust that underpinned the transatlantic bridge has severely eroded. In the Middle East, Israel will likely continue pushing for nothing short of the total capitulation of Iran's nuclear and proxy capabilities, while the terrified Gulf states will embark on massive arms procurement programs to secure their borders. For America, the haunting echoes of Vietnam are growing louder. The military must find a way to achieve a decisive, rapid victory or risk sinking into a bloody, unwinnable quagmire in the desert. What are your thoughts on this unprecedented global situation? Is the president right to use extreme rhetoric to force allies to pay their fair share? Or is tearing down NATO during a global crisis a dangerous and reckless gamble? I want to hear your perspective in the comments below. Should the United States immediately pull its troops back from the Iranian border, or is finishing the fight the only way to ensure security? Make sure to subscribe for daily factual updates on this unfolding geopolitical madness. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss a thing, and share this breakdown if it helped open your eyes to the reality of the board. Drop a like for more deep analytical dives into the chaos shaping our world. Stay informed, stay hyper-vigilant, and stay safe. Our next deep dive drops tomorrow, where we will unpack the sudden, shocking twists in the Russia-Ukraine theater. Thank you for watching.